Britain has some of the finest gardens anywhere in the world. For me, it's about getting in amongst the wonderful plants that flourish in this country and sharing the passion of the people who tend them. However, there is another way to enjoy a garden. And that's to get up above it. I love ballooning because you get to see the world below in a whole new light. From up here you get a real sense of how the garden sits in the landscape, how the terrain and the climate has shaped it. And I want you to share that experience with me. I'm getting ready to float high above a county blessed with some of the most stunning landscapes in Britain. Today we're in Sussex, a county that's made up of chalky downlands, forested weald and some of the most heavily populated coastal areas. Sussex lies right to the south-east coast, bordered by Hampshire and Kent. What an amazing view. This is my chance to view wonderful Sussex as I've never seen it before. Sussex is officially the sunniest county in England, and that's why this part of Sussex has some fantastic gardens. Today I'm dropping in on two magnificent gardens, both of which have undergone a transformation.
This was the visitors' car park.
The car park?
It was just concrete and tarmac.
That's amazing. And they have the power to change the lives of the people who tend them.
When I came, I ended up meeting my now fiancé, so he's a full-time gardener here in the gardens.
We'll be exploring the country's earliest formal garden and finding out how the Romans transformed British gardening forever. And of course, I'll be lending a hand too. Looks like a hairnet, mate.
I won't say what that reminds me of.
Go on, up you go, lad! Hey!
Oh, that's enough.
Sussex might be sunny, but here in the foothills of the South Downs, the land is deluged with over 40 inches of rain a year. Fortunately, the chalk soil allows water to drain through it quickly, meaning plants' roots never get soggy and gardens can flourish. None more so than the first garden I'm dropping in on. West Dean is renowned the world over as a showcase that can inspire any gardener, and it lies 7 miles north of Chichester. There's been an estate here since the 17th century, but the 90 acres of garden and parkland we see today took shape at the start of the 19th century. North of the manor house, which is now a college, almost half of the garden is devoted to arboretum. It was planted in the 1830s and is filled with mature beech, horse chestnut and cedar trees, as well as rhododendrons and azaleas. I won't have time to take a stroll through it today, but I know one place I'll definitely have a saunter. Just south of the Arboretum is one of the garden's most remarkable features, a 300-foot-long Edwardian pergola running across the lawn. It looks spectacular from up here. I can't wait to see it close up. When viewed from above, West Dean Gardens really comes alive. You can see the intense amount of care that goes into that productive garden. The greenhouses, the straight lines of vegetables, the fiery borders, and I just can't wait to get down there. Surprisingly, the garden hasn't always looked this wonderful. In 1987, a great storm hit the south of England. With ferocious power, it smashed and uprooted millions of trees. West Dean had to be closed for a year, just to recover. I've been visiting Westdean Gardens for the last 30 years and have seen them grow. This garden speaks of horticultural excellence, and it's not just in this beautiful productive vegetable garden. The pergola, the wild garden, the arboretum, the execution of excellence in this garden is outstanding. It makes me tingle every single time I come, because to see that level is wildly exciting and is a standard that we should hope to attain. Beauty, excellence and magic. But beauty, excellence and magic don't happen in gardening by chance. 23 years ago, a couple arrived to inspire a bold restoration that transformed these 19th century gardens into a 21st century masterpiece. Garden supervisor Sarah Wayne arrived here with a good day from Australia and a passion to make these gardens bloom again. Hi Sarah.
Hello, Christine.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
How nice to see you.
And you too. Welcome to Westdean.
Oh, great pleasure to be back. Now, what are you doing there?
I'm tying in these tomatoes so that they scramble all the way up the wigwam.
Right, and is this just one plant then?
No, it's more than one, it's three. It's really just an experiment.
Okay.
But looks good, I
It does
think.
look good, yeah. Can I give you a hand?
Yeah, sure.
Tie in and sort of do
Got a
things.
knife?
Yeah, I got a knife, yeah, no
There's
string
some
though.
string.
Great, excellent. Okay, so you're just doing standard tying in
Yeah,
and
that's
knotting
right,
and tying.
yeah. Just onto the structure or the string here.
So how did you actually get into gardening, Sarah?
Well, I suppose through my parents. I'm Australian. We had quite a big garden. My dad did the veg, my mum did the flowers.
How did you get into the UK?
Legally.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
I came over in 1979 and I was lucky enough to get a job at Kew Gardens.
A job?
Yeah,
Great. So had you trained in Aussie?
I had, yes, yeah. I did a 3-year diploma.
And how did you find Kew?
I would say Kew was like doing another 3 years of education because there are a lot of knowledgeable people there. And funnily enough, it's also where I met my husband.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Jim, Sarah's other half, is head gardener at Westdean, and he's also Sarah's boss.
It's hot work standing around nattering, so I thought I'd better bring you a cup of tea.
That's very kind of you. What I want to know, since I got you together, do you squabble?
Do we squabble?
Daily? Yes,
Daily.
daily.
Really?
But we always make up by the end of the day.
What's the vision for the garden? You know, you've got this level of excellence. People come expecting it to look superb. Are you going to move it on? Are you going to, develop that?
Our strapline at one point was high-class horticulture in a historic setting.
Okay.
Which we kind of felt was what we wanted to do, really. We've taken something which was rather tired and rather run down and made it into, well, I feel a bit embarrassed saying this, but I think it is a bit of a showpiece now.
It is a showpiece, and when I
And-
think of Westdean, I think of excellence.
Well, that's a nice compliment from an old pro like yourself.
Oh.
I mean that nicely.
You mean old or pro? And like the old pro I am, I'm off to help Sarah in one of Westdean's star attractions, the Victorian glasshouses. She's got a job for me that I used to do with an old bit of hosiery.
This is the melon house, Christine.
Look at this lot.
They're great, aren't they?
Wow, look at the quality of these leaves. Normally they look quite manky. They are spectacular, Sarah.
That's the right reaction, Christine.
Wow. Now then, come on. I know you want me to help you tie,
Yes.
but being a shorty,
Oh.
I'm going to have to step up because I can't
poor thing.
reach otherwise.
Poor girl.
Great.
We're just going to support some of these fruit.
I used to use tights or stockings in the old days.
Right.
And as the fruit grew, they actually expand with them. So
Yeah.
this is looks like a hairnet, mate.
I won't say what that reminds me of.
Go on. Now, come on. Tell me about these fantastic greenhouses. I mean, it's an amazing range. I can't believe for 2 minutes when you came to this garden they were in good nick.
No, they hadn't had any money invested in them for a number of years. And when we came 23 years ago, they were in a state of dereliction. And we were given the opportunity to renovate them all.
And how many do you have?
We have 13 glasshouses of different styles. So we've got 3 vineries, 2 fig houses, 3 devoted to tomatoes. We grow aubergines, chilies most importantly, and we have several display houses growing things like fuchsias, ferns, pelargoniums, tropicals, bromeliads, you name it, we grow it.
Glasshouses like these at West Dean didn't come cheap. In the early 19th century, glass had a huge tax imposed on its sale. And in a double whammy, you paid a property tax based on how many windows your home had. It was a tax on light and air in all but name. By the 1850s, those hated taxes had disappeared. Landowners, grown rich from the Industrial Revolution and the expansion of the British Empire, had the wealth to build greenhouses and fill them with fashionable exotic plants or extend the growing season of our own fruit and vegetables. With Victorian innovation and engineering, glasshouses grew both larger and smaller. As Sir Joseph Paxton was building the Crystal Palace in London, Victorian manufacturers were making plain and functional self-assembly glasshouses for the increasing demand of the rising middle classes. Whether you were growing an exotic pineapple in your glasshouse or a humble tomato in your greenhouse, the Victorians finally let the light shine through.
They are wonderful documents, in a sense, of the importance of late Victorian horticulture and the work that was done by the pioneers of that time.
Well, it's such a treat, and this is how we used to do it. And that relationship between a person understanding not only the horticultural requirements, but the engineering skills that brought it all together. I mean, gardeners are awesome beasts, and I really believe it. Not only can we grow, but we have to be able to control our environment, we have to understand about ventilation, we have to understand about heating, we have to be able to maintain it, we have to know about boilers, we have to know about torque pressures, and you're passing on those skills to younger gardeners.
It's a privilege to be able to work in this sort of environment, I recognise that. And also, it's a privilege to be able to hand those skills on. It's one of the things I love to do.
Go on, let's see what we can do. Sarah's so right. It's so important to pass down our gardening knowledge to the next generation so they can be inspired to leave their mark on our horticultural landscape. And that's just what's happening over on the Sussex coast in Brighton.
All right, folks, unload the tools and we'll take it up to the site.
Young volunteers for the Sussex Wildlife Trust have been transforming this once neglected green space on the Craven Estate into a flourishing community garden to encourage local wildlife. But even though it's wild, it still needs a little taming from time to time.
We could open up quite a nice big area here. We'll then take some of the topsoil off and we can use that as our area to plant the tray of flowers that I've got there.
The head man leading the youth rangers today is Hugh Morgan.
We carry out a wide variety of practical conservation tasks on sites around the city. And that can be anything from gardening for wildlife that we're doing today to putting up dormouse boxes, clearing out ponds, improving pathways, whatever really, so a wide variety of activities. This can come out, the rosebay willow herb, because that has a tendency to take over, so they can be pulled up as well.
You?
Hello.
Some netting over here. What do you want?
OK, I wouldn't worry about this. A bit of old weed matting. I think it'll probably be easier to work with it there rather than trying to pull it up. We can cut into it and plant through it if we need to.
Okay. This is an area where it's sort of been overtaken by this sort of long, rank grass that just takes over everything and no flowers can grow. So we're cutting back the grass and clearing the topsoil here so we can mix it up and plant some wildflowers, which we've got sort of some native wildflower species. It's really great fun and people are all really nice. It's just a fun thing to get out and do in the sunshine like this, and it's all sort of conservation work, which is what I've always sort of been into. So yeah, it's really great fun. Love it.
It's nice to see an area that the community's going to be able to use again, because it just looked kind of like an overgrown mess when we arrived in the morning. So it's really nice to see it really coming together.
By no means do all the volunteers come from a horticultural background. In some cases, the day job can even come in handy.
I'm normally a mobile hairdresser. My hair clients are always quite surprised that I do this on the side because it is something completely different to the beauty, fashion industry. Mainly what I get out of it is just knowing that I'm helping out, really, helping conserve little nature reserves around Brighton.
It's just quite a rewarding thing, nice for the community, it's benefiting lots of people.
Some of the volunteers can remember what the wildlife garden looked like before all their hard work.
The area has really transformed since I've lived here. For instance, all the orchard growing, the trees, the wildlife areas. Over the last 6 years, it's massively transformed.
Last job of the day is planting some wildflowers to attract those all-important bees and butterflies.
Right, fantastic effort today, everybody. It looks brilliant, really, really good. I'm really pleased with what we've done on a very, very hot day, so thank you all very much. Lovely.
It's so inspiring to see a new generation taking their first horticultural steps. And just like at the Craven Estate, Sarah and Jim have introduced a wild garden to West Dean. It's a beautiful spot with swathes of grasses, cowslips and meadow flowers, all attracting local wildlife. The alliums in particular are loved by the butterflies. Alliums, also known as ornamental onions, are grown for their showy flower heads which come in a range of sizes. Colours vary, but most range between purple, lilac and white. Planted in the autumn, they should pop up and bloom the following year. But even when they've lost their flowers, they're still a stunning architectural feature. They look the best when they're planted throughout a border, where they stick up like lollipops. I'm meeting someone rather special here in the Wild Garden, one of West Dean's large team of volunteers.
So Laura, how long have you known the garden?
I first came here when I was a teenager, and since then have been revisiting off and on pretty much all the time, probably with a slight break when I was at university.
Has it changed much over the years?
Hugely. The first time I came was probably 5 years into when Jim and Sarah had arrived and started doing all the restoration work in the walled garden. And then this part, sort of the wild garden, the spring garden, the sunken garden, was all sort of 10 years in. They were really sort of pushing out and building up the garden. And it's just a complete transformation.
But just as people can transform a garden can transform the lives of those who love it. Only a few years ago, Laura was a city high flyer in London.
I ended up doing a law degree, first of all, and came to the end of that and decided I didn't want to be a lawyer and didn't really have a plan B as such. So tried out a few things and sort of by accident ended up in headhunting, which I certainly didn't envisage I was staying for sort of almost 10 years, but those things happen, time passes and you kind of do what you do, and suddenly I sort of realised I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my working life. I'd almost grown quite resentful of the whole travelling, the city just being sort of crushed and just the busyness and people everywhere.
With a yearning for green spaces, Laura moved back to her Sussex roots and the countryside. Revisiting childhood haunts like West Dean provoked a strong reaction.
It was quite a guttural kind of feeling, just instinctive. I should be in these kinds of places, not stuck in an office.
After that discovery, Laura began investigating the idea of becoming a volunteer gardener.
So how did you get to come here?
I was looking really to get some practical work experience, and the first garden I wrote to was obviously here, and asked Sarah if she'd possibly take me on, and she said yes.
Do you think it's made you a better person? Calmer, more
I think
reflective?
It's made me probably a truer version of myself. I think I probably was trying to kind of live the city life and do the city thing when I was in London. Now I certainly think I'm a much happier person doing this than I could ever have been staying in London doing an office job. It's been just a fantastic adventure, really, and I hope it continues for many more years.
You see, because gardening's not just about cultivating plants, it's about cultivating people. Bring the two together, they grow and they bloom.
Absolutely right. My experience has certainly proved that, and I would urge anyone who's even thinking about it to make that step into it.
Now, it wasn't just plant knowledge you gained from this garden, was it?
No, rather amazingly, I met my now fiancé here, so he's a full-time gardener here in the gardens.
When did you first meet?
Well, I saw him the first day and I said good morning, and then we ended up going out on our first date here, actually, at the cafe for a tapas evening, 3 weeks later.
3 weeks? So you was in there pretty quick.
And then, yeah, the rest of the is history. We ended up, coming back and moving to Chichester in January.
Now, is it just plants that turns you on in the garden?
No, I think the wonderful thing here is the sort of backstory of the college, which was once a fantastic country home, but the last person who sort of lived here was resident was Edward James, who was hugely involved and very passionate about the arts. In fact, he was a major friend of Dali and kind of all the surrealist painters and artists. So you have this sort of imbued through, and going into the college where you have some incredibly wacky and interesting pieces of art and sort of interior design, and sort of things like the fiberglass trees which he left in the garden, which are kind of his last stamp. It's just amazing. It kind of gives it that added quirkiness and interest to the whole thing.
West Dean has given me and many others so much pleasure over the years. I want somehow to honour Laura and the other volunteers for their hard work.
Heaven forbid, but if you was to leave and you was to place a tribute here, would it be a plant or would it be a piece of artwork?
I think I'd probably say a piece of artwork, because it would happily kind of link together the kind of history of the college and Edward James's legacy and the garden as well. It'd be really lovely to combine the two.
With this in mind, I've asked John Privett, Head of Metalwork Conservation here at West Dean College, to make a tribute honouring the work of the garden's volunteers.
I was really pleased to be asked to make something for Laura to give to the gardens, and spent a bit of time racking my brains really about what I could make for her. I walked out for a tea break and saw the weather vane on top of the clock tower outside and thought, that's it. I like the way she was walking forwards. It shows her kind of busy and in motion. I took that and then put it on the computer and got a silhouette. And then I can stick it onto sheet copper. And what I'm going to do is just roughly cut out the main shape. If anyone knows Laura, they'll be able to recognise her.
Just 10 miles southwest of West Dean, as the crow flies, is another Sussex garden which has undergone a transformation. And from the sky, the view is magnificent. Set high on a hill, Arundel Castle simply commands the Sussex landscape. Built at the end of the 11th century, it's been the family home to the Dukes of Norfolk and their ancestors for nearly 1,000 years. Just across the road is another breathtaking building, Arundel Cathedral. But it's the castle gardens lying between these two magnificent buildings that I've come to see today. Like West Dean, Arundel is a sheltered and traditional kitchen garden. And besides the glasshouses, box-edged beds filled with bursts of hot colour, then tempered with cool. This side of the garden is quite formal and enclosed with shingle paths and hedging. But as you head towards the chapel, it becomes much more open, and there's another garden I've particularly come to see. This is the stunning Collector Earl's Garden. It's hard to imagine, but only 8 years ago, this entire space was covered in concrete. The Duke of Arundel's archivist, John Robinson, is going to fill me in on how this magical garden came into existence.
So when was this amazing garden opened, John?
It was opened in 2008.
And what was here before?
Well, this was the historic kitchen garden. It was given up, like so many of these gardens, in country houses after the Second World War. And latterly, this was the visitors' car park.
The car park?
It was just concrete and tarmac. There wasn't a tree, a bush or anything in it.
Crikey!
Just the outside brick walls.
That's amazing.
Hard surface throughout.
So what was the inspiration behind it?
Well, the history of the Howard family here, there's somebody we call the Collector Earl of Arundel in the early 17th century. And he had a garden, which we know a bit about because there are designs by Inigo Jones, the great architect, for gateways and pavilions. And in the background of portraits, you have glimpses through into the garden. So on the basis of those few clues, it was decided to do a sort of recreation of that garden. But it's imaginary, really.
Yes.
I mean, it's, you know.
So it's Jacobean in style.
Yeah.
But how would you describe the layout of this garden?
Well, it's a formal garden because it's divided into enclosures by hedges and the big pergola across the middle, and then you've got very strong axes, cross axes and the central axis and so on.
And what about the architecture? I mean, it's amazing architecture, but what's the story behind that?
Well, it's partly buildings that we know existed, but they would have been stone or brick or whatever in the garden. And the whole point about this, it was all done in what's called green oak. The thing about green oak is it doesn't mature. You know, you cut it and you build it, and then it goes this silvery grey colour, and this gives it a slightly zany, naturalistic, organic quality.
But you see, it's incredibly theatrical.
Yep.
Just smacks Italy
Yep.
to me. I'm on the Isola Bella. I'm there on the northern Italian lakes. I'm looking at theatre and drama and the heat of the sunshine. It's Italy on the south coast.
That was the inspiration. I mean, the Collector Earl went to Italy in 1610, and when he came back, everybody sort of rather joked that he'd gone native. He spoke Italian, he liked Italian food, he ate snails, things like that. You know, and his garden was all all'italiano, as they put it. So things like these urns are an Italian design.
I just think it's frankly, truly amazing.
The Collector Earl's fascination with all things Italiano predates the grand tour that young upper-class men of means undertook in the 18th and 19th centuries. Since then, Italian influences have been felt in art, architecture and, of course, gardening. But an earlier Italian invasion has left its mark too. Just a few miles west of Chichester is Fishbourne Roman Palace, home to the earliest formal garden in the country. Archaeologists first unearthed this site in the 1960s, and as well as the wonderful mosaics on the inside, they also discovered how the palace garden was laid out. And guess what? Those Romans were very green-fingered, as Fishbourne's head of learning, Katrina Burden, explains.
The Romans introduced gardening. People in the Iron Age wouldn't have gardened for aesthetic pleasure. The Romans, however, changed all that, and they planted massive formal gardens using plants like this box hedge, actually, to really make a statement about the fact that they were changing the landscape. They had this control over nature, and that's something that would have been completely alien to those Iron Age Britons living here before the Romans arrived. We know these hedges were planted in this way because of the archaeological evidence, because those original excavations uncovered the bedding trenches for these particular hedges, so we know they were in this really ornate geometric pattern that you see down here. So it's the differences in the colours of the soil which really indicated that there was something quite special about this garden.
It's thought the palace was inhabited by someone of high rank, called Togidubnus, who was a Celt loyal to the Roman emperor. Built on four sides around a central garden, the site covered an area as big as 2 football pitches.
We know that he had these enormous gardens, these very impressive gardens, and it would have taken a large number of slaves just to keep them up to scratch. And we imagine that Togidubnus was meeting very important people, and he was really showing off his wealth, his status. Why? The entranceway, by people coming through these gardens as they came up to meet him in the audience chamber. This is one of the tools that they would have used here in the Roman gardens. We've got a pair of replica iron shears, and these would have been used for trimming the hedges. And you can imagine trying to keep all these hedges under control here at Fishbourne would have required an army of slaves.
But these invaders to our shores didn't come alone. The Romans brought new and exciting plants here from across the whole Roman Empire, shipped in clay plant pots across the English Channel.
Things like marigolds and roses, the things you'd expect to see in an English country garden, actually were brought in by the Romans nearly 2,000 years ago.
But an army marches on its stomach, not how prettily the garden grows.
The Romans brought with them a wide range of edible vegetables, things that we take for granted nowadays. Things like garlic, and we've got some elephant garlic here, cucumbers, walnuts, rosemary, a lot of our herbs. The Romans also brought in pears and apples, a lot of the fruits that we're so used to seeing in our orchards. We know that the soft fruits they also tried, but some of them, particularly things like olives, of course didn't grow so well in this climate, so it was the hardier varieties that survived right through to the present day.
But what about us poor Brits? Where were we while these fancy Romans were gorging themselves on their Mediterranean diet?
People in the Iron Age living around here would be reliant on sort of cereal crops. They'd be growing wheat and barley, using it to make pottage and bread. They'd be making use of wild vegetables, wild fruits like these blackberries here, but of course you'd be very reliant on what was available at what time of year, and sometimes, like these blackberries, the crop wouldn't necessarily have come out as well as you'd expected.
For the Romans, a garden wasn't just for growing food. It was an important outdoor pharmacy. All manner of medical ailments had a Roman garden cure, even if today some sound a little far-fetched. In fact, it's difficult to imagine what our traditional British gardens would have looked like if it wasn't for those Italian men in togas.
Over the last 2,000 years, we can see how their both culinary and horticultural legacy has stayed with us and actually has influenced British cooking and British gardening even today.
Over at Arundel Castle, we seem to have slipped back in time too. As a historical jousting tournament is taking place on the castle grounds.
How many revolutions?
I'm not sure what medieval gardeners got up to. Hopefully not jousting. I'm no good on a horse. I'm off to meet Arundel's head gardener, Martin Duncan, in the kitchen garden. Hi, Martin.
Oh, hello, Christine.
What are you up to?
Oh, bit of apple pruning, summer pruning.
OK.
Very important for the apples at this time of year. It also exposes the apple to the sun as well, and that ripens the fruit.
So, and this is something that people get confused about, isn't it? Because the restricted form, so on the cordons, the espaliers, the fans, those that are smaller in size, what we're trying to do is change all this vegetative growth into fruiting wood.
Yeah.
But you see, winter pruning is all about regeneration of wood.
Wood, and getting rid of canker and all sorts of disease.
So it's just two different pruning types, isn't it?
And if there's one which is sort of 8 centimetres or 8 inches long, like one over here, we
Leave it.
That. That's it, yeah.
Because that's got the fruit for next year.
That's what you want, yeah.
But this is an interesting variety, isn't it?
It's a stunning apple called Peasgood Nonsuch.
Great name.
And one apple of these, you can do a whole apple crumble or one of those baked ones because they reach at least 4 times that size.
Many would consider an apple the quintessential British fruit. Food writer Edward Bunyard wrote in 1929, "Let the Frenchman have his pear, the Italian his fig, but for us, the apple." Training trees against a wall or a fence is a perfect space-saving way of growing apples if you only have a small garden. There are over 2,000 apple varieties to choose from, and our climate is perfect for growing them. Most of the apple production in Britain is limited to a dozen or so varieties you see in the supermarket. So why not ring the changes and pick a heritage variety? As a gardener, I love apple trees in the spring when they're full of blossom, but I also love to eat the fruit too.
Hey, baked apples where you take the centre out and you fill it with sultanas and then you put a blob of butter, then a blob of marmalade and you cook them and the marmalade caramelises on the sultana. It's delicious with lashings of thick yellow custard.
That sounds delicious.
Oh, it's the best way to eat an apple.
It is, and especially picked fresh from the tree.
Oh, yeah.
We're just so lucky here. You know, we've got a tropical area, we've got an Italianate area, a stumpery, and we've got a stunning cut flower garden and this lovely organic kitchen garden. So there's a surprise around every corner.
And one of of the new surprises visitors can discover is the Stomper. Trees have always had a place in our gardens, but trust the Victorians to turn that idea on its head. A Stomper is an arrangement of dead tree roots placed upside down or on their side. This Stomper is only a couple of years old and in a very modern touch has been adorned by bright and exotic plants. But the first ever Stomper is much darker and foreboding place. This is the original Stomper, built at Biddulph Grange in Staffordshire in 1856. It's both strange and beautiful at the same time. It's looked after by gardener Paul Walton.
It's very eerie, prehistoric, a bit scary almost, you know, and you just wouldn't have seen this in Victorian times at all. You come round the corner and you've got this almost grotesque, prehistoric look to it. You can almost imagine the ladies with the posh frocks and snagging the dresses on some of the stumps. I imagine they'd be quite shocked at what they saw and almost saying, what on earth have you done here?
Seen as Victorian oddities, Stompers could be described as Gothic, or they may have been inspired by the Romantic movement, which emphasised the beauty of nature. But there were some very practical reasons for their existence too.
During Victorian times, they commissioned quite a few plant hunters to go overseas. The plants were brought over, then the areas were built to house the plants. And this fabulous Stomper is ideal for fern. It creates little pockets for planting them and showing them off to create an area which worked really well for that kind of plant. Was brilliant. Pull that barrier out, Bob. Right, Rob, take your end round. Yeah. Wedge it on that stump there.
Despite the trees being dead, a Stomper still needs a lot of TLC.
Quite an effort getting them in. We can't get any machinery here neither, so it's pretty well much manpower. What I would do, Rob, I'd maybe sit that down there a little bit low and try to get them two spikes up. What we want to do is create this canopy coming over, really, and I feel like you're a bit enclosed, a bit daunting almost when you walk through this bit. It's all right, that isn't looking too bad now. You come through here now, got the height there. There's other areas we've still got to do, but this was quite an open area. I'm really pleased that we've got that sorted today, so brilliant.
What was once dull and lifeless has been turned into something vibrant and alive. Now that is a transformation. Back at Arundel Castle, another otherworldly feature awaits me at the Collector Earl's Garden. This is a version of Oberons Palace, a fantastic spectacle designed by Inigo Jones for Prince Henry's entertainment in 1611. Oberon was the king of the fairies in medieval and Renaissance literature, and Martin thinks I might be royally entertained by what's inside it.
This is an amazing building.
It's shell, isn't it?
It is shell. This is all made out of mussel shells.
That is stunning.
All pasted on, but looking as urns. But quite stunning.
I mean, beautiful.
But what's really exciting is, let me show you this. If you would like to turn this...
Right.
Just slowly, and see what happens. Maybe a little bit quicker.
Oh, I didn't.
You're worried now, aren't
no,
you?
No,
You're not? No, no.
Go on, up you go, lad! Way! Oh! Whee! Oh, I've got it. Up she goes! Ah, down she comes!
I can tell you're enjoying this.
Up and down, whoa! Go on up there! Hey, I'm down, come on, come on! Down you come, gently.
Once more and I'll catch it.
Okay, bring it down. Oh, look at that. Wow.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
What
now
a
you know why I wear a hat inside.
I mean, what a party piece, G's and T's, and have your friends and up and down. Fantastic.
Even though Arundel Castle is 1,000 years old, a garden is a constantly evolving thing. So whether you simply plant a new herbaceous border or transform an ugly car park into a Jacobean-themed vista, a garden is ripe for change. Back at West Dean, you can really appreciate the scale and dimensions of the garden from above, especially the Edwardian pergola, but I want to take a closer look. The 300-foot pergola was designed by architect and gardener Harold Peto in 1912. It's a wonderful structure which unites great planting and architecture. As you look through it, it frames the parkland as a living landscape painting. I thought it looked fantastic from the skies. I think it's even better on the ground. Former high flyer Laura gave up a career in the city to volunteer at West Dean, and it's changed her life. To thank her and all the other garden volunteers, I've organised a tribute to mark all their hard work.
So Laura, I thought it would be quite nice to leave something here that you might be able to look up to in years to come and enjoy. So, what do you think?
Wow. That's incredible.
Now, the key thing is, do you recognise the shape of the person?
It looks vaguely familiar.
Yeah, because it should, because it's you.
Yeah.
It's all there. The garden, the history,
yeah,
the people, and there's plants hiding in the wheelbarrow.
Yes. I've never seen someone so joyfully pushing a wheelbarrow.
You see, now, the only job is that it's got to go up there.
Oh, God, do I have to climb up the wall?
No, you don't, because where are you, Jim?
I'm behind.
I
Behind
think it's your job.
You tell me when.
No, no.
I thought above the door.
Above the door?
Come back.
Above the door, yeah. Right, whoa.
Lovely, lovely.
Now, what do you think
gonna
to that?
be great.
That looks great. I can't believe I've been immortalised in metal.
Absolutely. Yes, well, I think you've done a splendid job, and I think that'll look lovely there. I wonder how long we can leave him there.
Not very long.
I think Laura's weather vane is a very appropriate symbol of her story and connection to West Dean, but it does remind me that good flying weather is few and far between. It's been such a treat to see these Sussex gardens from my vantage in the sky. And what I can see is the changes here at West Dean. Arundel Castle, even the Craven Estate Community Garden, have not only transformed the gardens, but they've changed the lives of the people who care for them. Sometimes you need to see things from a whole new perspective to truly understand them.